Episode 2. If you haven't watched the first episode yet, I advise you to watch it first to understand the events of the story. You will find the first episode in the description, or in the channel. I had no expectation that the simple villagers would step in to save me. They knew me only as a simple migrant worker, a transient figure in their lives, but they chose to stand by me in a moment when I didn't expect support from anyone. When the armed group of villagers appeared, I felt a mix of surprise and gratitude. They didn't have the training or weapons that the soldiers had, but they knew their land well and moved swiftly and lightly through the fields and forests. The clash between the villagers and the soldiers began to intensify, and I used those moments to sneak to a safer place where I could assess the situation and plan my next move. I saw Maria, the old woman whose farm I worked on, standing among the fighters, holding an old rifle in her trembling hands. She was shouting words to encourage people to resist, a scene I could never have imagined witnessing from her. I hid in one of the old barns behind the farm, trying to make sense of the chaos surrounding me. But I knew I couldn't stay there forever. The soldiers had taken control of most of the village and were searching houses one by one. If I didn't act quickly, they would find me. I decided it was time to make a decisive move. I needed to escape, but I could no longer rely on conventional methods. I had one option: to flee via the river that ran along the edge of the village. The river was dangerous, with fast and turbulent waters, but I was ready to take the risk. All I had to do was reach it before they caught me. I cautiously left the barn, sneaking between the trees and ruined buildings. The soldiers were getting closer, and the sound of gunfire was drawing nearer. On my way, I encountered one of the villagers, a young man named Ricardo, who was injured in his arm but continued to fight. He stopped when he saw me, looking at me with eyes full of pain and determination. "You need to go now," he said to me in a low but firm voice. "The river is your only way out. I'll try to distract them." There was no time to argue with him. I looked into his eyes and felt an indescribable gratitude. I nodded and ran toward the river with all the strength I had. The river was only a few kilometers away, but the path to it was filled with dangers. I saw some soldiers along the way, speaking in their language as they approached. I had to move quickly and quietly at the same time, taking advantage of the darkness and the noise from the fighting in the village. When I finally reached the river, my heart was pounding. The water was moving with frightening speed, but I had no other choice. I took off some of my heavy clothing and plunged into the water. The current was incredibly strong, but it carried me away from the village quickly. I fought to stay above the surface, trying to avoid the rocks and debris that the river was sweeping along. After what felt like hours, I noticed the current weakening and the river starting to widen and become calmer. The sky was completely dark, and I had no idea where I was. I pushed myself toward the shore and crawled out of the water with difficulty. I was exhausted, soaked, and cold, but I was alive. The wilderness surrounding the river was dense and desolate. I had no idea which direction to take, but I knew going back to the village was no longer an option. I didn't know if the villagers had succeeded in fending off the soldiers or if Ricardo was still alive. But I knew one thing: I had to keep moving. I walked all night. But they were also, in the days that followed, the idea of revenge began to take shape in my mind once again, but this time with more realism. From my experience with Isabella and her grandmother, I had learned that the soldiers who came to the village were part of a local group seeking to take control of the area. But there was something more. They were also looking for someone specific, a member of the Mafia family believed to be hiding in the region. I realized that I wasn't the only one who had fled to this place, and that Vincent was using his forces to track everyone down, settling scores and eliminating any potential threats. I now understood that the danger surrounding me was not just a direct result of Vincent's men chasing me, but part of a larger plan aimed at purging the area of anyone who might pose a threat to the Valentino family. I began sneaking around the surrounding areas, gathering information about this local group of soldiers and the leader who commanded them. His name was Raul Martinez, and he was one of the field commanders receiving direct support from Vincent to carry out his missions. Raul was a ruthless man who controlled the region with an iron fist. He had gathered around him a group of former soldiers and criminals, using them to enforce his will and dominate everything from drug trafficking to smuggling. I knew that confronting Raul directly would be suicide, but I also knew that I needed to act quickly. Every day, I felt the circle of danger tightening around me, and the time I had was running out. My communication with Isabella continued, and I began to sense that she knew more than she was letting on. I started to feel that she had more secrets about these soldiers and their connections to the Mafia. I had a feeling that her grandmother might be aware of some things. Perhaps she knew some of the people being targeted, or maybe she had dealt with Mafia families in the past. I wasn't sure, but I knew I needed to learn more. One night, when Isabella brought me dinner as usual, I decided to ask her some questions. I started the conversation gently, mentioning that we were living in dangerous times and that I needed to know more about the situation in the area to protect myself. Isabella looked at me with her innocent eyes, but there was a serious look in them that was unusual for children her age. "You're not like the others who came here," she said in a firm tone. "The others were just hiding, but you're thinking about going back and fighting." There was tension in her voice, but she was right. I was searching for a chance to exact revenge, looking for a loophole through which I could strike back at the heart of the enemy. "Do you know why these soldiers came here?" I asked her gently. She nodded. "They're looking for another man, someone like them, but he escaped. Grandma told us that he was an important person in the city, but he betrayed them. The soldiers are here not just to scare us, they're searching for him. And they've heard that you might be connected to him." This discovery was like a bullet to the chest. I didn't know who this man was, but I knew that having someone else in the same situation as me meant I wasn't alone, and that there were more people trying to escape Vincent's grasp. "Do you know where this man might be now?" I asked her, trying to keep my composure. "No, but Grandma might know. She said he's hiding in a place far away, very far from the villages and cities." I began to feel that things were getting more complicated. Now I had a new objective, finding out who this person was and whether I could work with him. If this man was the primary target of the soldiers, my chances of survival might increase if I could reach him before they did. That night, I decided to get closer to the grandmother, to try to gain more of her trust. I started visiting the hut where she and Isabella lived more regularly. She was an old woman, wise in her appearance and words, but behind those bright eyes there was something else. I felt it with every conversation. After days of cautious communication, the grandmother finally allowed me to enter her true home, deep in the forest, where no one comes without her permission. The house was filled with old books and black and white photos, as if I had entered a different world. She began telling me about the history of the area and the men who had passed through here. She spoke about Vincent and others like Raul, men with big ambitions and desires who had no problem crushing anyone who stood in their way. "The man you're looking for, he's not as far as you think," she said one day while we were sitting by the fireplace. "But he won't trust you easily. He's been betrayed by those he trusted the most, more than once. I need his help, and I need him to help me," I told her honestly. "If you know where he is, please tell me. We have to move before the soldiers find him." The grandmother looked at me thoughtfully, as if measuring my sincerity and determination. "I'll tell you where he is, but you need to know that getting to him won't be easy. He's hiding in a place where no roads reach, where the forest swallows anyone who tries to cross. You'll have to prove to him that you're not like the others, that you're not just looking to run away but to survive with honor." I realized that this woman knew more than she was saying. She might have known this man personally, perhaps knew his past, but I had no other choice. If this man was the key to my survival, I would do whatever it took to reach him. The grandmother gave me precise instructions on how to reach this man's hideout. It was a remote place deep in the forest, far from any known paths. The only way to get there was through narrow, complicated passages, protected by nature itself from any intruder. The next morning, I prepared to leave. I gathered all the food and water I needed, and took my only weapon with me. This departure was different. It wasn't an escape this time. It was a quest for a potential solution. Maybe this man would be the ally I needed to face Vincent and Raoul, or maybe it would just be the end of my journey. I set out on my journey into the unknown, following the grandmother's instructions carefully. With every step, the forest seemed to try to swallow me, as if it was testing me. I knew that if I lost my way, I wouldn't find a way out. But I kept moving, determined to reach a goal that seemed distant yet might be close. After days of walking through the dense forest, the room was dark enough to cloud my thoughts, but the man's presence before me was as clear as daylight. His eyes pierced through the darkness, fixed on me in a way I couldn't ignore. It felt like I was standing in front of a mirror, but this mirror didn't just reflect my face. It reflected everything I had been through and everything I had become. "I know everything about you, Tony," the man said in a calm but weighty tone. "I know why you ran, and I know why you've returned now." It was clear that he knew my secrets, perhaps more than I had imagined. But I wasn't ready to play the role of the weak one in this confrontation. "If you know so much about me, why didn't you come out to face me? Why wait for me here in the dark?" I asked sharply. The man smiled, a smile full of understanding. "Because I needed you to come on your own, to choose to come here of your own free will. In this world, Tony, we choose our destinies, even if we think others are deciding them for us." The man stepped into the faint light seeping through one of the cracks in the wall, and for the first time, I saw his face clearly. It was covered in wrinkles, but his eyes shone with a vitality that didn't match his age. There was something in his features that suggested wisdom and experience, as if he had lived a life full of events that couldn't be easily described. "You're here because you're seeking revenge, aren't you?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Talking to him felt like trying to navigate a complex maze. But he was right. In the depths of my heart, revenge was the fuel driving me forward. "Yes, I want revenge on Vincent. I want to take back my life, and I want to end this hellish cycle I've been living," I finally said, gathering all the courage I had. The man nodded slowly. "Revenge, Tony, is not a solution. Revenge fuels the fire, but it doesn't extinguish it. But I see you've already chosen your path." I knew his words held some wisdom, but I wasn't in a position to listen to a lecture on morality. I was here for a specific reason, and I wanted to know how this man could help me. Episode 3? Available in the channel.